The accusation, when it came, was not loud. It was a quiet, cold, and heavy thing delivered by one of the richest men in the world. Alistair Sterling's priceless watch was missing, and his icy gaze fell on the last person to clear his table, a young waitress named Bella Rossi. Cornered, terrified, and on the verge of losing everything, she did not cry. She looked the millionaire in the eye and said the 5 words that would change his life. Check the security footage. He thought he was unmasking a simple thief. He had no idea that he was about to uncover a shocking betrayal, and that the innocent waitress he'd accused was a person of such profound integrity that a Rolls-Royce would soon be waiting outside her door. The Crest Room was not a restaurant, it was a statement. Perched on the 60th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, it offered a breathtaking, godlike view of the glittering city below. The decor was a symphony of quiet, punishing expense, dark mahogany muted velvets, and the soft, warm glow of perfectly calibrated lighting. It was a place where multi-billion-dollar deals were signed over $300 entrees, a place where power was the main course. And Isabella Bella Rossi felt like an imposter every time she stepped onto its plush, sound-dampening carpet. At 24, Bella's life was a world away from the effortless luxury of the Crest Room's clientele. Her reality was a small third-floor walk-up in Queens, the constant gnawing anxiety of her mother's mounting medical bills, and a dream that was gathering dust on a shelf. Just 2 years ago, she had been at the top of her class at Columbia Law School, her future a bright, ascending star. But then her mother's multiple sclerosis had taken a severe turn, and her father, a man she hadn't seen in a decade, had offered no help. Bella had made a choice. She had put her own dream on hold, dropped out of school, and taken the best-paying service job she could find to manage the crushing costs of her mother's care. Her life was a tightrope walk of exhaustion and sacrifice. She navigated the demanding, often condescending patrons of the Crest Room with a quiet, professional grace that belied the constant stress churning beneath the surface. She was a ghost in their world, a pair of hands to deliver their food and clear their plates, her own story and struggles completely invisible to them. Tonight, her most important table was Table 12, a secluded corner booth occupied by 2 of the most powerful men in the city. The first was Alistair Sterling, the reclusive, formidable CEO of Sterling Industries. He was a man in his late 60s with a reputation for ruthless efficiency and a personal life shrouded in secrecy. He was old money, a titan from another era, and his presence in the restaurant created a palpable aura of respect and fear. The second man was Marcus Vance, a younger, flashier, and notoriously aggressive hedge fund manager. Vance was the picture of new money, a slick, tailored suit, a diamond-encrusted watch, and a predatory smile. The tension between the 2 men was a visible thing, a low-level hum of conflict that made Bella's job even more stressful. She knew from the restaurant grapevine that Vance was attempting a hostile takeover of a beloved family-owned manufacturing company that Alistair Sterling had a deep personal interest in protecting. This was not a dinner. It was a battle. Bella served their table with her customary flawless professionalism. She was a silent, efficient presence, refilling water glasses, explaining the chef's specials, and ensuring every detail was perfect. She noticed Alistair Sterling's only piece of jewelry, a simple, elegant, vintage gold watch on his left wrist. It was an understated piece, but it radiated a sense of history and profound, sentimental value. He would occasionally unconsciously touch its face, a gesture of quiet, deep-seated habit. She also noticed the way Marcus Vance's eyes kept flicking to the watch. His expression, a strange mixture of admiration and something else, something she couldn't quite place, something covetous. As the tense, terse dinner wound down, Bella cleared the main course plates. Alistair had draped his suit jacket over the back of his chair. For a brief split second, as she reached for his plate, her hand came close to his jacket. It was a normal, incidental part of her job, a movement she had made 1,000 times. But she felt Marcus Vance's sharp, calculating eyes on her, and a strange, prickling sense of unease washed over her. The dinner concluded with a tense, non-committal handshake. Marcus Vance, his predatory smile still in place, left first, leaving Alistair Sterling to settle the considerable bill. Alistair was preoccupied, his mind clearly replaying the tense negotiations, the battle for the soul of the company he was trying to protect. He signed the check with a distracted air, added a generous tip, and rose to leave. Bella, ever efficient, was at the table moments after he departed, ready to clear the last of the glasses and reset it for the next reservation. It was then that her world came to a screeching halt. Sitting on the plush velvet of the booth, half tucked into the crease of the seat back, was the vintage gold watch. Her heart leapt into her throat. He had forgotten it. The one personal, precious item the cold, powerful billionaire seemed to possess. Her immediate instinct was to grab it and run after him, but the protocol at the Crest Room was rigid. All lost items were to be turned over to the manager immediately. She carefully picked up the watch. It was heavier than it looked, the gold warm from his skin. The back was engraved with a simple, elegant inscription, "To my Alistair. Forever and always, Eleanor." A wave of sympathy, unexpected and profound, washed over her. This was not just a piece of jewelry, it was a legacy, a memory. She turned to take it to the manager's office, her heart pounding. But it was too late. The sound of heavy, hurried footsteps approached, and Alistair Sterling reappeared at the table, his face a mask of cold, controlled panic. "My watch," he said, his voice a low, urgent command. "It's gone." His icy grey eyes scanned the table, the floor, and then they landed on the watch held securely in Bella's hand. The shift in his expression was instantaneous and terrifying. The controlled panic was replaced by a look of cold, absolute certainty. The blood drained from his face, and his eyes, which had been merely intimidating, were now filled with a look of profound, personal betrayal. "You," he breathed the single word, an indictment. The restaurant's manager, a slick, obsequious man named Mr. Dubois, who had seen his most important client return, rushed to the table. "Mr. Sterling, is everything all right?" "No, everything is not all right," Alistair said, his voice like ice, his gaze never leaving Bella. "My watch, a family heirloom, was on this table, and now your waitress has it in her hand." The accusation hung in the air, as heavy and as suffocating as a shroud. Bella felt the blood drain from her own face. She was holding the watch, yes, but only because she had been about to turn it in. "Sir, I found it," she stammered, holding it out to him. "You left it on the seat. I was just taking it to the lost and found." Alistair didn't take the watch. He simply stared at her, his face a mask of utter, cynical disbelief. In his world, a world of predators and opportunists, there was no room for simple honesty. He saw only the most obvious damning evidence: a poor waitress, a priceless watch, a perfect opportunity. The fact that he had felt a flicker of respect for her quiet professionalism during the dinner only made the perceived betrayal sharper. "You were clearing the table," he stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "My jacket was on the chair. The watch was in my pocket. It is now in your hand. The sequence of events is quite clear." "Mr. Sterling," Mr. Dubois interjected, his face pale with a sycophantic terror. "I am so sorry. This is a disgrace, an unacceptable breach." He turned on Bella, his eyes blazing with a desperate need to appease his powerful client. "Isabella, what is the meaning of this? You are a thief. You are fired. I am calling the police." The world began to spin around Bella. Fired. The police. Thief. The words were a brutal, violent assault. Her mind raced a chaotic swirl of panic and a profound, searing sense of injustice. She thought of her mother, of the medical bills of her lost dream of law school. This accusation, this one false moment, would destroy everything she had worked so hard to hold together. She was a poor waitress against a powerful billionaire. It was her word against his, and she knew with a sickening certainty whose word the world would believe. The scene at table 12 had become a vortex of hushed, dramatic attention. The other patrons of the Crest Room, sensing a scandal of the highest order, were pretending not to watch their gazes, furtively flitting over their conversations. A low, curious buzz. Bella stood in the center of the storm, the heavy gold watch feeling like a burning coal in her hand, the twin accusations of her manager, and one of the most powerful men in the city, pressing down on her like a physical weight. "The police are on their way." Mr. Dubois said, his phone already in his hand, his expression a mixture of righteous fury and a desperate, fawning desire to be seen as taking control for his most important client. "We will have this sorted out immediately, Mr. Sterling, I assure you." Panic, cold and suffocating, threatened to overwhelm Bella. Tears pricked at her eyes. Her first instinct was to cry, to plead, to break down, and insist on her innocence in a torrent of emotional denial. She knew in that moment that this was a crossroads. A hysterical, weeping waitress would only confirm their suspicions. It would fit their narrative of a guilty, cornered thief. But then something else kicked in. Deep within her, beneath the layers of exhaustion and fear, the mind of a law student, the sharp, analytical brain that had once debated complex torts and passed constitutional law, roared back to life. This was not just a personal crisis. It was a legal proceeding, an informal but no less serious arraignment. And in a legal proceeding, emotion was a liability. Evidence was power. She took a deep, steadying breath, forcing the tears back, pushing the panic down. She straightened her back, and when she spoke, her voice was not the trembling whisper of a victim, but the clear, steady, and shockingly composed voice of an advocate pleading her own case. "That will not be necessary, Mr. Dubois," she said, her calm tone cutting through the tension. All three men, Alistair Dubois and a security guard who had now materialized at the table, stared at her, surprised by her sudden shift in demeanor. She looked directly at Alistair Sterling. She did not see a billionaire titan. She saw the plaintiff, the accuser, and she would address him as such. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice a model of respectful but firm clarity. "I understand why you have come to this conclusion. The circumstantial evidence is on its face compelling, but a conclusion based on circumstantial evidence is often a flawed one. I did not steal your watch." Alistair's expression remained a mask of cold, cynical disbelief, but a flicker of something surprise intrigue appeared in his icy grey eyes. He had expected tears, denials, hysterics. He had not expected a reasoned, logical defense. "You say the watch was in your jacket pocket?" Bella continued, her mind working with a speed and clarity she hadn't felt in years. "And that I was near your jacket when I cleared the table." "That is correct. However, you were also engaged in a tense business dinner for 2 hours. You were distracted. Is it not possible, sir, that you removed the watch yourself at some point, that you placed it on the table or on the seat beside you, and in your preoccupation, you simply forgot?" It was a brilliant, simple turn of the argument, shifting the focus from her actions to his own potential fallibility. "And you, Mr. Dubois," she said, turning to her now flabbergasted manager. "You are prepared to terminate a 2-year employee with a perfect record and involve the New York Police Department based on a few seconds of observation and the assumption of a distraught customer." "The customer is Mr. Sterling," Dubois sputtered. His word is an assumption." Bella interrupted her voice, gaining a new powerful confidence. "And before you ruin my life, based on an assumption, I have a very simple and very reasonable demand." She held Alistair Sterling's gaze, her own eyes blazing with the fire of a profound and righteous injustice. "This is the Crest Room," she stated, "one of the most exclusive and secure restaurants in the world. I know for a fact that you have a state-of-the-art, high-definition security system. There is a camera," she said, tilting her head slightly, "right up there with a perfect unobstructed view of this very table." She took a step back, opening her hands in a gesture of complete transparency. "I didn't take your watch. I found it, and I was about to turn it in, as is proper procedure. The truth of that is not a matter of my word against yours. It is a matter of verifiable empirical fact, and it is all on tape." She then delivered the 5 words that would change everything, the words that were not a plea, but a challenge, a demand for the very thing her accusers had abandoned the truth. "Check the security footage." The demand, so simple and so logical, hung in the air, a stark and unassailable challenge to the chaotic emotion of the moment. Mr. Dubois, who had been ready to play the part of the righteous protector of his client's property, now looked deeply uncomfortable. He had been so eager to appease Alistair that he had completely bypassed the most basic investigative step. Alistair Sterling, however, was a man who, despite his grief and his cynicism, had built an empire on the cold, hard logic of data. Bella's calm, evidence-based demand cut through his emotional fog. It was the response of an innocent person. A guilty person would have pleaded, would have cried, would have tried to run. They would not have demanded to see the tape of their own crime. A flicker of doubt, the first he had felt, entered his mind. "Very well," Alistair said, his voice a low, grim rumble. He looked at the manager. "Let's go see the footage." The walk to the manager's office was a tense, silent procession. Alistair, Bella, Mr. Dubois, and the head of the restaurant's security followed one another down a narrow, sterile corridor, away from the opulent theatre of the main dining room. Bella could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. She knew she was innocent, but she also knew that cameras could be fallible, that angles could be deceiving. Her entire future was hanging on the grainy digital ghosts of the past 2 hours. The security office was a small, cramped room, the walls lined with a bank of monitors displaying feeds from every corner of the restaurant. The security chief, a burly ex-cop named Frank, sat down at the main console, his movements practiced and efficient. "Table 12. Mr. Dubois commanded, his voice tight with anxiety. "Pull up the feed from the last 2 hours." Frank typed a few commands, and the main screen flickered to life, showing a clear, high-angle view of Alistair's booth. Frank fast-forwarded the footage, the images of the dinner, a silent, sped-up pantomime. He slowed it to normal speed as the dinner concluded. They watched as Marcus Vance stood up and shook Alistair's hand. They watched as Alistair remained seated, distracted, as he signed the check. And they watched as he slid out of the booth, his suit jacket catching slightly on the edge of the table, and then walked away. The watch was not visible. "There," Mr. Dubois said, a note of triumphant vindication in his voice as he pointed to the screen. "See, he leaves. The watch is gone." "Keep playing," Alistair said, his voice a low command, his eyes narrowed in intense concentration. The footage continued. They saw Bella approach the table. They saw her clear the plates and glasses with her usual unobtrusive efficiency. As she reached for Alistair's water glass, her hand did indeed pass close to his jacket, which was still draped over the back of the booth. "There. That's it," Dubois exclaimed. "She must have lifted it, then. Be quiet." Alistair snapped his gaze, never leaving the screen. They watched as Bella finished clearing the table and walked away. The booth was now empty. A moment later she returned to wipe it down. It was then that her eyes fell on something in the crease of the velvet seat. She leaned in her expression one of surprise and picked up the watch. She held it for a moment, looked around, and then began to walk toward the manager's office. She was turning it in. Bella whispered a wave of relief so profound it almost made her knees buckle. "See, I was telling the truth." But Alistair held up a hand, his eyes still glued to the screen. "Wait," he said. "Frank, go back. Go back to when Vance stood up to shake my hand, and zoom in, as tight as you can." Frank, confused, rewound the footage. He isolated the moment of the handshake and magnified the image. The resolution was remarkably clear. The screen now showed a close-up of the two men. As they shook hands, Marcus Vance used his left hand to pat Alistair on the shoulder, a classic, friendly-seeming gesture. But the camera from its high angle saw what no one at the table could have seen. As Vance's left hand rested on Alistair's shoulder, his fingers, with the fluid, practiced grace of a professional pickpocket, dipped for a fraction of a second into the inner breast pocket of Alistair's jacket, which was draped over the chair. They emerged just as quickly, holding the gold watch. In one smooth, continuous motion, as he was turning to leave, Vance dropped the watch down into the crease of the seat. The entire act took less than 2 seconds. It was a piece of malicious, brilliant, and almost invisible corporate espionage. A stunned, horrified silence descended upon the small security office. The truth was so much uglier, so much more shocking than a simple theft. Marcus Vance had stolen the watch, but he hadn't kept it. He had planted it. He had deliberately set a trap, knowing the watch's sentimental value would send Alistair into a state of emotional distress. He had created a situation designed to cause chaos to embarrass Alistair, and to frame an innocent waitress, all for a purpose Alistair couldn't yet comprehend, but which he knew was deeply sinister. Alistair Sterling sank into a nearby chair, the full weight of the revelation and of his own catastrophic false accusation crashing down upon him. He looked at Bella Rossi, at the young woman he had been ready to send to prison, at the incredible, unshakable integrity she had shown in the face of his own blind, grief-stricken rage. The shame he felt was a physical, burning thing. "Oh my God," he breathed, his voice a hoarse, broken whisper. "What have I done?" To understand the depth of Alistair Sterling's shame, one had to understand the sacred place the watch held in the shattered architecture of his heart. It was not a Patek Philippe or a Rolex, not an object of ostentatious value to the outside world. It was a simple, elegant 1950s Omega, but it was the single most valuable thing he owned. It had been a gift from his wife, Eleanor, on their 10th wedding anniversary. He could still remember the moment she had given it to him in this very restaurant, at this very table 20 years ago. Her eyes had sparkled with a light that for him had outshone all the city lights below. "So you'll never be late for a dinner with me again." She had teased her laughter, a warm, beautiful sound that he could still hear in the quietest moments of the night. Eleanor had been his cornerstone. While Alistair was a creature of logic, of numbers, of cold, hard strategy, she had been his connection to the human world. She was a brilliant historian, a woman who saw the world in stories, in empathy, in the deep, complex currents of the human heart. She had been his advisor, his confidant, his best friend, and the unwavering moral compass of his life. Her death 5 years ago from a sudden aggressive cancer had not just broken his heart. It had unmoored him from the world. He had retreated into himself, into the cold, clean logic of his work. He had built a fortress of wealth and solitude around his grief, and the watch had been his one constant connection to the life he had lost to the woman who had been his son. He touched its face 100 times a day, a subconscious, desperate ritual to reassure himself that the warmth, the love, the integrity she represented had been real. When he had discovered the watch was missing, his reaction had not been that of a man who had lost a piece of property. It had been the raw, primal panic of a man who was losing his wife all over again, of losing the last tangible piece of her memory. And in that moment of pure grief-stricken terror, all of his logic, all of his famed strategic composure had evaporated. He had lashed out, and his suspicion had fallen on the most convenient, most plausible target, the poor waitress. His mind, steeped in a lifetime of cynical business dealings, had immediately defaulted to the ugliest of assumptions. He had looked at Bella Rossi and had not seen a person. He had seen a variable, a threat, an opportunist. He had projected onto her the sins of a world that had time and time again proven itself to be transactional and cruel. Now, sitting in the cramped, airless security office, watching the silent, damning footage of Marcus Vance's casual treachery, Alistair was forced to confront two horrifying truths at once. The first was that he was facing an enemy far more depraved and manipulative than he had ever imagined. Vance hadn't just been trying to win a business deal. He had been playing a sick psychological game, using Alistair's deepest, most personal wound as a weapon against him. But the second truth was far more devastating. It was the truth about himself. He, Alistair Sterling, a man who prided himself on his judgment, on his ability to read toward people had been completely and utterly wrong. He had allowed his own pain, his own cynicism to transform him into the very thing he despised: a bully, an accuser, a man who wields his power carelessly and destructively. He looked at Bella. She stood by the door, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale, but her expression no longer one of fear, but of a quiet, sorrowful vindication. She had been proven right, but it was a victory that had come at a terrible cost to her own dignity. He had threatened her job, her reputation, her very freedom. He had almost ruined the life of an innocent young woman, a woman who he now realized with a fresh, searing wave of shame had shown more character and integrity in the face of his own brutish power than he had shown in years. "Mr. D'Arce," Dubois Alistair said, his voice a low, gravelly command, as he finally rose from his chair. "You will go back to my table, and you will find the check I signed. You will tear it up. You will then bring me the full personnel file for Isabella Rossi, along with a corporate checkbook." He then looked at Frank, the security chief. "And you will make a high-resolution, time-stamped copy of this footage. It is now evidence." He turned to Bella, and the cold, powerful CEO was gone. In his place was a man, humbled, broken, and profoundly, deeply ashamed. "Ms. Rossi," he began, his voice thick with a regret so deep it was almost a physical thing. I cannot begin to tell you how sorry I am. What I did, what I said, it was inexcusable. There is no excuse." He saw the future he had almost created: Bella in a police station, her mother alone, and terrified her dreams of law school turned to dust. The architect of so many successful companies had, in a moment of blind grief, almost become the architect of a young woman's ruin. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to his very soul that he had to do everything in his power to not just apologize, but to make it right. The next morning, Bella Rossi was woken by an insistent buzzing from the intercom of her small Queen's walk-up. She groggily checked the clock. It was 7:00 a.m. Her shift at the diner, she had picked up a second job to make ends meet after being unceremoniously fired from the Crest Room, didn't start for another 3 hours. She buzzed the visitor in assuming it was a package delivery. A few moments later, there was a soft, polite knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find a man in a crisp, dark chauffeur's uniform. He was holding a single perfect white orchid in a small vase. Ms. Isabella Rossi, the chauffeur, asked, his voice a polite British baritone. "Yes," she replied, confused. "My name is Arthur. Mr. Alistair Sterling sent me," he said. "He extends his deepest apologies for the early hour, but he has requested your presence at his offices this morning. The car is waiting downstairs." Bella stared at him, dumbfounded. "A chauffeur A summons to Alistair Sterling's corporate headquarters. I don't understand." "Mr. Sterling said to tell you that it is a matter of the utmost importance regarding your future." Arthur said, his expression impassive but kind. "He also instructed me to give you this." He handed her a thick, embossed envelope. Hesitantly, she took it. Inside, she found 2 things. The first was a cashier's check for $50,000. The attached note simply read, "For your lost wages and immediate distress. This is an apology, not a settlement." The second was a business card for one of the top doctors in the field of multiple sclerosis at Mount Sinai Hospital. On the back, another note. "An appointment has been made for your mother for a full consultation this afternoon. All costs will be covered." Tears welled in Bella's eyes. This was not just an apology. It was a profound act of care, a demonstration that he had not just heard her story, but had acted upon it with a swift and stunning generosity. "Please, Miss Rossi," Arthur said gently. "He is waiting." An hour later, Bella was stepping out of a gleaming, dark blue Rolls-Royce Phantom and into the cavernous, awe-inspiring lobby of Sterling Tower on Park Avenue. The building was a monument to quiet, immense power, a world away from the greasy spoons and walk-up apartments that constituted her reality. She was escorted directly to the top floor to Alistair Sterling's private office. It was a vast minimalist space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park. Alistair stood to greet her, not from behind his massive desk, but from a small seating area with comfortable armchairs. He was dressed in a simple dark suit, and his face was etched with a new, humbled sincerity. "Bella," he said, using her first name for the first time. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." He did not waste time with small talk. He looked at her directly, his gaze full of a profound and heavy regret. "I have spent the entire night reviewing not only the events of yesterday, but my own conduct over the past 5 years. What I saw on that security footage was not just the treachery of a business rival. I saw a reflection of a man I have become, a man who is cynical, suspicious, and who almost allowed his own pain to inflict a terrible injustice upon an innocent person. There is no excuse for my behavior. I can only offer you my deepest, most sincere apology, and my promise to make things right." He slid a thick, leather-bound portfolio across the coffee table toward her. "My team and I," he continued, "spent the night learning about you. We learned about your brilliant record at Columbia Law. We learned about your mother's illness and the sacrifices you have made for her. We learned of the dream you were forced to defer." He opened the portfolio. "Bella, I cannot give you back the time you have lost, but I can give you back your future. What I am about to offer you is not charity. It is a business proposition from one person of integrity to another." The offer he laid out was staggering. First, he offered to personally fund the entirety of her mother's medical care for life, including a full-time in-home nurse through a private trust. Second, he offered her a full all-expenses-paid scholarship to return to Columbia and complete her law degree. And third, he said, his voice full of a new, quiet excitement, "I am offering you a job. A real one. I am in the process of creating a new, in-house, pro bono and corporate ethics division within Sterling Industries. Its mission will be to provide legal aid to those who cannot afford it, and to ensure that our own company operates at the highest possible standard of integrity. It needs a leader, someone with a brilliant legal mind, a first-hand understanding of struggle, and an unshakable moral compass." He looked at her. "It needs you. I am offering you a paid director-level internship to begin as soon as you re-enroll at Columbia, with the promise of a full-time position as the head of the division upon your graduation." Bella sat in stunned, breathless silence. He was not just giving her a gift. He was not just solving her problems. He was restoring her dream. He was taking the very qualities she possessed, her intelligence, her integrity, her sense of justice, and he was offering her a platform to use them to change the world. "Why?" she finally whispered, the single word encompassing the enormity of the question. "Why are you doing all this?" Alistair looked out the window at the vast, sprawling city below. "Because my wife, Eleanor," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "was a woman who believed in second chances. She believed that our true legacy is not the money we make, but the good we do. For the past 5 years, I have forgotten that. You, Bella, with your simple, profound act of integrity, you reminded me. Helping you is not just about making amends. It's about me finally starting to honor her memory. It's about me trying to become a man she would be proud of again." The final act of the drama unfolded, not with a quiet act of generosity, but with a cold, surgical act of corporate warfare. The battle for the control of North Star Manufacturing, the family-owned company that Alistair Sterling was trying to protect and Marcus Vance was trying to acquire, was set to culminate in a final decisive board meeting. Marcus Vance arrived at the meeting, confident, almost swaggering. He believed he had the votes. His hostile takeover bid was financially superior, and he had spent weeks lobbying the board members, promising them a golden parachute if they sided with him. He also believed he held a psychological advantage. The incident at the Crest Room, which he had so cleverly orchestrated, had surely shaken Alistair Sterling, making him appear erratic and emotionally unstable. The meeting was held in a sterile, impersonal boardroom, the air thick with tension. Alistair Sterling sat at one end of the long table, his expression calm and unreadable. He had Bella Rossi with him, seated not behind him as an assistant, but beside him as a junior legal advisor, an official intern from Sterling Industries. Her presence was a quiet, powerful statement, and it clearly unnerved Marcus Vance, whose eyes kept flicking toward her, a flicker of confusion and annoyance in his gaze. The meeting began. The company's CEO presented the two offers, Vance's aggressive all-cash takeover and Sterling's more modest stock-based merger proposal, which was designed to preserve the company's legacy and protect its employees. On paper, Vance's offer was undeniably more lucrative for the shareholders. When it was his turn to speak, Vance was at his most charmingly predatory. He spoke of synergy of shareholder value, of the bold, decisive leadership he would bring. He subtly contrasted his own modern, aggressive approach with the stagnant, sentimental protectionism of Alistair Sterling. Then it was Alistair's turn. He did not present a counteroffer. He did not talk about financials. He stood up, and his legal team dimmed the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice a low, steady calm. Before you make your decision, I believe it is essential that you understand the true character of the man you are considering handing your company over to. Character, I believe, is the single most important metric in any business dealing. It tells you more than any balance sheet. The large screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. It did not show a PowerPoint presentation. It showed the high-definition, time-stamped security footage from the Crest room. The board watched in stunned, uncomfortable silence as the entire ugly scene played out. They saw the tense dinner. They saw Marcus Vance, with a thief's stealthy precision, lift the watch from Alistair's jacket and plant it in the booth. They saw Alistair's panicked return his false accusation. They saw Bella's calm, courageous demand. And they saw the final damning reveal in the security office. Alistair did not provide any commentary. He simply let the silent, irrefutable truth of the footage speak for itself. When the lights came up, the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The board members stared at Marcus Vance, their expressions a mixture of disgust, shock, and profound distrust. They were not just looking at an aggressive businessman. They were looking at a man who was at his core a dishonorable cheat. Alistair Sterling rose to his feet. "My offer to this board," he said, his voice ringing with a new powerful authority, "is not just about money. It is about partnership. It is about a shared commitment to integrity, to legacy, and to a way of doing business that is honorable. Mr. Vance has shown you his character. Now you must decide what kind of character you want to define the future of your company." The vote was a mere formality. It was unanimous. The board rejected Marcus Vance's offer and accepted Alistair Sterling's. Marcus Vance sat in stunned, defeated silence, his face a mask of pure, impotent rage. He had been beaten not by a better offer, but by a better man. His own treachery, his own clever, cruel game had been used as the instrument of his own public and professional annihilation. As the meeting adjourned, Alistair and Bella walked out of the boardroom together. He was the quiet victor, the man who had protected a legacy. She was the budding lawyer, the woman whose simple act of integrity had been the catalyst for it all. "You were right, Bella," he said, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "The truth is a far more powerful weapon than anger." "It is," she agreed, her own smile reflecting a future that was for the first time in a very long time, bright, open, and full of limitless possibility. They were not just a CEO and his intern. They were partners, and they were just getting started. The courtroom victory had been a detonation, a stunning and public demolition of Marcus Vance's treachery. But like any explosion, it left behind a cloud of unsettled dust and a landscape that was irrevocably changed. For Bella Rossi, the days that followed were a surreal navigation of this new world. The immediate crushing weight of her mother's medical debt and the impending foreclosure had vanished, replaced by a different kind of pressure. The dizzying, terrifying reality of a future she had never dared to imagine. The $50,000 check from Alistair had been a tangible, breathtaking symbol of this new reality. It had allowed her to quit her second job at the diner, to pay off the most urgent of her mother's bills, and to simply breathe for the first time in years. But it was Alistair's other, more profound acts of care that were truly reshaping her world. A week after the board meeting, Bella stood in the sunlit living room of a beautiful, fully accessible ground-floor apartment in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in Queens. A team of movers dispatched by Alistair's office were carefully arranging her mother's familiar, well-loved furniture. Her mother, Maria Rossi, sat in a comfortable armchair by the window, a warm blanket over her lap. Her face, so often etched with pain and worry, now a portrait of stunned, tearful disbelief. A full-time, highly qualified home care nurse, a woman with a warm, gentle demeanour named Eleanor, was making tea in the kitchen. Alistair had been true to his word, and then some. He had not just paid for a consultation. He had, through his foundation, established a comprehensive lifelong care plan for Maria, ensuring she would have the best doctors, the best treatments, and the best in-home support, all without Bella ever having to worry about another bill. Alistair arrived that afternoon, not in his Rolls-Royce, but in his discreet Audi, and he did not come empty-handed. He brought a large, fragrant pot of white orchids for Maria and a small, beautifully wrapped box for Bella. A housewarming gift, he said, his usual corporate formality, now replaced by a hesitant, almost shy warmth. Inside the box was a brand-new top-of-the-line laptop. For your studies, he explained. A law student needs the proper tools. It was in these quiet, thoughtful gestures that the foundation of their new relationship was being laid. He was not just a benefactor writing checks. He was a man who was actively, personally invested in rebuilding the future he had almost allowed to be destroyed. Yet amidst this incredible life-altering generosity, a shadow lingered. The story of the courtroom showdown had become a whispered legend in the city's financial and legal circles. Bella found that when she went to the local grocery store, people would stare their eyes full of a new speculative curiosity. She was no longer just Bella, the waitress from the Crest room. She was now a figure in a drama, the poor waitress who had been swept up into the world of a reclusive billionaire. The narrative, while true in its broad strokes, felt like an ill-fitting costume, and she feared it would define her forever. Her first day as an intern at Sterling Industries was a trial by fire. The summons in the Rolls-Royce had been a surreal dream. Walking into the vast, intimidating lobby of Sterling Tower was a stark, terrifying reality. The air hummed with a quiet, ruthless efficiency. Men and women in impeccably tailored suits moved through the space with the predatory grace of sharks, their voices low, their conversations a clipped secret language of mergers and acquisitions. Bella, in her simple, new but modest business dress, felt like a complete and utter fraud. She was escorted to the 70th floor, the home of the company's legendary in-house legal department. The space was an endless vista of glass-walled offices and hushed, carpeted corridors. Alistair met her at the elevator bank, sensing her trepidation. "Deep breaths, Bella," he said, his voice a low, reassuring murmur. "You've faced down Marcus Vance. A few corporate lawyers should be a walk in the park." His attempt at humour helped, but her anxiety returned the moment he introduced her to the head of the legal department, a man named Robert Caldwell. Caldwell was a man in his 60s, a lawyer of the old school, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was fiercely loyal to Alistair, but he was also a staunch traditionalist. He looked at Bella, his expression a polite but impenetrable mask, and she could feel his skepticism. He saw her not as a promising legal mind, but as the boss's pet project, an anomaly in his highly credentialed, Ivy League-educated department. The other interns, a collection of confident, privileged young men and women from Yale and Harvard, were no better. They knew the rumors. They looked at her with a mixture of awe at her connection to the great Alistair Sterling and a subtle, dismissive condescension. She was the waitress, the charity case. Alistair, with a keen understanding of the dynamics at play, had prepared for this. He didn't just introduce her, he defined her role with a clear, public display of his trust. "Bella," he said in front of Caldwell and the entire legal team, "your first project here is one of singular importance. As you know, our company is built on a foundation of integrity. But I have come to believe that our ethical guidelines, while robust, are too focused on the letter of the law and not enough on its spirit." He handed her a thick binder. "This is our current corporate ethics and compliance manual. I want you to tear it apart. I want you to review it, critique it, and redesign it from the ground up. I want a new code of conduct for this company, one that is not just about avoiding litigation, but about actively promoting a culture of honor and accountability. You will have full access to all personnel and all departments. You will report directly to me." "Mr. Caldwell," he said, turning to the department head, "please ensure Ms. Rossi has everything she needs." It was a brilliant move. He had given her a real, substantial, and incredibly important task. He had bypassed the traditional intern grunt work and placed her at the very heart of the company's moral architecture. He had not just given her a job, he had given her a mission and a platform to prove her worth. For the next few weeks, Bella poured herself into the work. The timid, overwhelmed waitress vanished, and the sharp, analytical mind of the top-tier law student re-emerged with a vengeance. She spent her days in the Sterling Industries Library, a vast, silent repository of corporate history, and her nights at her small apartment, poring over legal precedents and ethical philosophy. She discovered that Alistair was right. The company's code of conduct was a masterpiece of legal defensiveness designed to protect the company from lawsuits. But it was soulless. It was a document that taught employees what not to do, but it did not inspire them to do what was right. It was during this deep dive that she found it. A small, almost overlooked clause in the company's whistleblower policy. It offered protection to employees who reported wrongdoing, but the process was a bureaucratic nightmare, requiring so many levels of verification that it effectively discouraged anyone from coming forward. It was a policy designed to create the appearance of accountability without the actual risk of it. It was a small, subtle flaw, but it was a crack in the very foundation of the company's integrity, and she knew exactly how to fix it. A month after she had started, Alistair invited her to dinner. It was not at the Crest Room, but at a small, quiet and authentic Italian restaurant in Greenwich Village that his wife Eleanor had loved. The atmosphere was different between them now. The awkwardness of their new dynamic had begun to fade, replaced by a comfortable, easy rapport built on their late-night work sessions and shared conversations. "So," he began after they had ordered, "the fearsome Mr. Caldwell, how is he treating you?" Bella smiled. "He's warming up. I think he was impressed with my preliminary report." "I know he was," Alistair said. "He told me you found a flaw in our whistleblower policy that a dozen of his senior partners have missed for the past decade. He said you have good instincts." From a man like Robert Caldwell, that was the highest possible praise. The conversation drifted from work to more personal matters. He spoke for the first time in detail about Eleanor. He told her stories of their early years, of her brilliance, her humor, her unwavering moral compass. "She would have liked you," he said, his voice soft with memory. "She was a champion of the underdog. She would have been appalled by what happened at the restaurant, but she would have been so proud of how you stood up for yourself." Bella, in turn, found herself speaking of her father, not just of his debt, but of his passion, his relentless optimism, his belief that a single brilliant idea could change the world. "I feel like, in this new role you've given me," she confided, "I'm not just rebuilding my own future, I'm honoring his legacy too, the part of him that believed in integrity." They discovered a shared, deep-seated belief system, a common ground forged in their respective losses and their shared admiration for the people they had loved. The wall of cynical distrust that Alistair had built around his heart had not just been breached, it was being carefully, methodically dismantled and replaced with something new. As he drove her home that night, a comfortable silence settled between them. The initial explosive drama of their meeting had given way to something quieter, deeper, and far more profound. It was the slow, careful, and beautiful construction of a partnership, a friendship, and the tentative unspoken promise of something more. The Rolls-Royce had been a summons to a new life, but it was the shared journey of rebuilding, of honoring the past, while creating a new future that was the true, priceless destination. The culmination of Bella's first 6 months at Sterling Industries was her presentation to the company's executive board. The project that Alistair had assigned her, the rewriting of the corporate ethics manual, had evolved into something far more ambitious. What she was proposing was not just a new document, but a new foundational pillar of the company's identity. She called it the Eleanor Sterling Cornerstone Project. The name itself was a stroke of quiet brilliance, a tribute to Alistair's late wife that immediately signaled the deep personal importance of the initiative. Bella stood at the head of the long, intimidating boardroom table, the same room where Marcus Vance's fate had been sealed. But today, the atmosphere was not one of conflict, but of transformative potential. She was not the nervous, out-of-place intern who had first walked these halls. She was a confident, articulate, and deeply prepared advocate for her vision. She spoke not in the dry, technical language of a lawyer, but with the clear, compelling passion of a leader. For the past 50 years, she began, her voice resonating in the quiet room, Sterling Industries has been a leader in innovation and financial success. Our code of conduct has been designed to protect that success. It is a shield, but a shield is a defensive weapon. I propose that our new code of conduct be a compass, a tool that does not just tell us what to avoid, but actively guides us toward what is right. She laid out a comprehensive, multi-point plan. It included a streamlined, truly anonymous whistleblower system protected by a third-party ethics organization to ensure there was no internal retaliation. It proposed a new mandatory ethical leadership training program for all managers, a program she had designed herself based on real-world case studies. But the most revolutionary part of her proposal was the creation of the pro bono and corporate ethics division. She had been promised the division she was now formally proposing to lead. It would not just be an internal department, it would be an active, outward-facing force for good. She proposed that every lawyer at Sterling Industries be required to dedicate 50 hours per year to pro bono work managed through her division, providing legal aid to underserved communities. In the end, it wasn't about a missing watch. It was about a moment of integrity that shone a light into the darkest corners of greed and betrayal. Bella Rossi, a waitress armed with nothing but the truth, not only cleared her name, but also set in motion a powerful chain of events that redeemed a grieving billionaire and exposed a corporate predator. Alistair Sterling, in turn, did more than just apologize. He invested in a future proving that the most valuable assets a person can have are character and compassion. Their story is a powerful reminder that a single honest act can change a life, and that true power lies not in what you own, but in what you stand for. If this story of integrity, unexpected partnership, and the triumph of character resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it as a reminder that the smallest good deed can have the biggest impact, and be sure to subscribe for more compelling tales of real-life drama and ultimate justice.